Good morning. Great to see that many of you have tuned in for our talk of the day. And today we're all about strategy. And we have some very inspiring industry leaders lined up for you today. It is important to us that you can interact with us throughout the talks, so feel free to send us messages in the chat. And do let us know if you face any kind of technical difficulties, because we will do our best to solve them. At the end of the talk, you are free to ask, or actually we're welcoming you to ask any kind of questions. You can add them in the Q&A. So our speaker for this morning is the tech-savvy Rachel Hardwick. She is the Group Technical Program Manager at Booking.com. And Rachel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say you're a tech translator, as you are here to help us to develop a more collaborative, strategic, and effective relationship with our engineering partners and stakeholders, which we all know speak a completely different language. So Rachel, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I've been called a few things in my career. I think tech translator is one, nerd herder is another, and it's actually pretty exciting, and it's kind of an honor. It's really being able to communicate between designers and the business and pretty hardcore back-end platform developers is something that it gets me up in the morning, and it's really exciting and it's super fulfilling. So let's get this party started. So hello, welcome. Thanks for joining. So to get us kicked off, I have a quick question. Also, just this is really awkward, not being able to see or hear or interact with an audience or with a group of people to kind of feel the vibe. So I really, really, really would appreciate it if you guys have questions, or if I'm not being clear, please use that chat bot, and I will be checking it to kind of go through. So to get started, I have a question for everyone. Who here knows that platform developers need to run at least 6 months ahead of product developers? Really quick. Is that just you guys get on your chat bots and let me know? Like, is that a really common or understood concept to all of you guys? Is that news to anyone? Any responses? Give it a second. Okay. I'm going to assume that that's kind of exciting. No one's responding. So I'm going to assume that that statement is interesting to you guys, because that's really one of the core foundations that we're going to talk about today. So how platform developers plan and think is very different than how application and product developers plan, think, organize, execute, operate. So what is it? Let's make sure here. So why is this important? And why is this an important tenet for what we're going to talk about today? The fact that platform developers, are need to work ahead of the group. What we're going to talk about and focus on is really understanding how platform teams look at planning, how they operate. And I really feel like having this understanding will help you as designers, whether they be UX, UI, graphic, any type of designer, wanting to work and collaborate better with platform developers, as well as just software engineers, whether they be front end, back end, any type of software developer. Ultimately, understanding how platform developers work gives you tools and techniques to get better collaboration with them, which at the end of the day is going to have better product and a better end customer experience. And that's really what we all strive for. So before I dive into details, I wanted to do a really quick intro and why I think I can talk about this. So a few fun facts. I actually have a degree in finance, not in computer science. I have enough scripting knowledge to be dangerous, but I've been in tech for 20 years. So the first job that I had in tech was actually at LucasArts as an assistant producer, making Star Wars video games. So the first game that I released was actually on the PlayStation 1. I joke with my boss that I was the last slip through into the Lucas production department in 1999 that had absolutely no game development experience and didn't know what I was doing. And that's actually kind of been an interesting foundation for my career. I'm a group level technical program manager now at Booking.com in the core infrastructure group. Everything that I know is pretty much learned on the job. I say this and it surprises some people, but I actually don't have a single certification. I'm actually going for my first Prince 2 certification. And it's interesting because a lot of the things that I'm studying as a tech program manager, they're very common. It's nice to have a framework, but in going through this training, it's really highlighted a couple things that I've known, but it's nice to have reinforced, which is, working with developers, working around planning, and problem solving. Having processes and frameworks is really amazing and wonderful, but at the end of the day, it's about human interaction and it's about communication. So in terms of the TLDR for what we're going to talk about today, spoiler alert, it's all about human interaction and how you work with people. I can say that based on, my experience working from LucasArts. I went on to work for a small studio that got acquired by Sega, working on PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3 games. I migrated from console game development in about 2008 to start working on free-to-play and massively multiplayer online games. So that's kind of how I got more into that hardcore back-end platform development area. From about 2008 until now, I've worked with MMOs, Star Wars: The Old Republic for BioWare EA. I've worked for Zynga, worked for a couple small scrappy startups that were not well funded that got shut down, worked for a very well funded startup. I've worked with platform teams that are small, from like 5 or 6 people to teams that are a lot larger. Booking is definitely the largest company that I've worked for. And we have well over 200 people in our core infrastructure department. So the reason that I say this is because in my 21 years experience in tech, the problems that designers, artists, non-software engineers have working with, whether they be front end or back end developers, they're pretty much the same. The size of the team makes the scale sometimes more challenging, but when we look at how we do strategic planning, how we do planning in general, it's all the problems are the same. So I don't like talking about myself, so I'm going to just jump into the topic. So degree in finance. I failed spelling in 4th grade. I'm a little bit dyslexic. I work with software developers. I am in a very hardcore platform backend environment. I just wanted to put this out there. Please prepare yourself for some seriously terrible slideware. I'm not a designer. So that's out there. And again, really to reiterate, I think size really doesn't matter. The size of the team, whether it be a 5-person platform team or a 200-person infrastructure org, the size of the team really doesn't matter. Again, I really want to emphasize this. When you look at a lot of the concepts, they're going to scale, right? Or they might not scale, but the problems and the issues are going to kind of be the same. So we're going to talk through a couple of case studies with, using Booking as an example, because I've been at Booking for the last 3 years and we just are wrapping up 2021 planning. So I want to kind of share some of the experiences with that. But again, I think these lessons will apply whether you're in a scrappy small startup with a small platform team or potentially no platform team because you're using managed services. But these lessons and concepts, I think, can be applied to any type of developer. Okay. So what are we going to focus on? I've made a career of translating and working with platform developers. So it was a bit daunting to identify like what are the kind of some of the key concepts I want to cover. So there's 3 things I want to focus on today that I think are actually pretty valuable. One, time is relative. Oh my God, the way that platform developers and backend developers think about time, whether it be the planning cycle, your release cycle, your sprint cycle, software, that just the whole software development life cycle is so different than application and product developers, like night and day different. So I want to talk about that a little bit and some of the implications. I think as designers, designers are so amazingly creative and visual, and I envy the things that you guys can create, like sometimes just sketching. My husband is actually a designer, and it's pretty amazing because we complement each other really well, and I'm in awe of some of his slideware and things that he does. I think oftentimes people forget and think that, developers, software engineers are so binary. It's a 1 or a 0. And while software developers and especially backend platform developers do think a bit differently, they're still extremely creative. And I think that there's amazing opportunities for designer and backend platform developer collaboration if you really kind of come at it using a lot of the same best practices that designers use in their day-to-day working with developers, maybe just tuned a little bit. So we'll focus on that for a minute. And really, you're going to hear me say this over and over again. Building software is actually really easy. Dealing with humans is really, really hard. And guess what? Software development is humans, right? It's people interacting, defining requirements. How do you collaborate? How do you provide transparency on how things are doing? So I want to talk about a few observations and learnings and kind of suggestions on how to ease that, human interaction part that makes development challenging. And at the end, we're going to wrap up with a few things that I take for granted that everyone knows. Thank you, by the way. We're going to talk about a few things that I take for granted that everyone kind of knows and understands. And when I was speaking to Lisa Anderson, who's a principal designer at Booking, who is the one that kind of brought me in here today, I'm like, everyone knows that, right? And she's like, no, everyone doesn't know that. So I want to kind of share a few of those things. And then we'll wrap up with some Q&A. So it's really awkward hearing myself talk without you guys. So I am going to definitely leave some time for Q&A because I'm definitely interested to hear what you guys have to say. So what I want you guys all, just to be really clear, what I want you guys all to get out of this is to just kind of have a high level understanding of what platform development means, how they plan, and how you can interact with them. And not just with platform developers, but developers of any kind. So thank you, Lisa. So a little bit of context. So before we start talking about some of these topics, I want to get some terminology out there, right? So from my perspective, a developer is literally anyone who contributes to building a product. And I want to be clear about that because I think there is sometimes, I don't know how you guys feel about this as designers, but sometimes I feel like there is a bit of arrogance where it's like only software developers are actually only software engineers can be developers. I think that that's crap. Personally, I think that anyone who contributes to building a product is a developer, be they a front end engineer, a back end engineer, a designer, a UX designer, a UI designer, a tester. I think even product and program management are on the outside, are developers as well, because they're contributing vital information and data and influence and whatnot to the development of this beautiful physical piece of software. Maybe not physical, but this thing, right? You're going to hear me say platform developer and product developer. So I just want to be really clear about what I mean by that. So in my mind, a platform developer, most platform teams are predominantly backend engineers. And platform developers build software for other developers, right? They're building, whether they be user account storage, they can be building frameworks, things like Node.js or Java frameworks for their developers to use. They're building these massive platforms for other developers to use for product developers, so that those product developers can then build end user facing products, right? So in my mind, that's the big distinction, is a platform developer really focusing on building platforms for other developers, product developers building things for end user consumers. A couple things to note. Again, I've been working in platform development exclusively for 13 years, something like that. That degree in finance is coming in. I've worked with platform developers for so long. And what I can say is this, I have not had, platform developers generally tend to be backend developers or maybe full stack developers. You'll have some systems reliability engineers, but they are all software engineers for the most part. Right now at Booking, we have one designer type person in a team of 200 plus people. So I think it's a really important distinction, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So in my mind, platform developers, hardcore backend and full stack devs. Where a product developer team is going to be a mix of software engineers, designers, testers, and just like a whole mix of people to get that product that goes out there. So makes sense, everyone? Does that make sense? Let me know if that doesn't make sense, so we can kind of move on from there. this is so simplified, and I know it. If you you can Google platform um, development, architecture, and you'll have 1,000 different things. I didn't want to get bogged down in that, but to be really clear as well, in my mind, a platform is a foundational piece of software that you can build applications and products on top of. Okay. And I think it's really important that we distinguish again between a platform and apps. All right. So with that, I'm going to move on. So the first topic, remember we had 3 topics. So the first topic I want to talk about is, oh my God, time is relative. um, time is relative. Uh, as a product developer, right? What's my next slide? All right, before we go there. So what do I mean by time is relative? Again, when you think about a platform developer versus an application developer, let me talk a little bit about, from my experience, what platform strategy really needs to be successful. So product team, I've worked on a couple small and scrappy product teams where it's like, this is a problem that we need to go fix. We're going to just get out there and basically start iterating very rapidly on identifying problems to this, identifying solutions for this problem, identifying something that an end customer or end users really need and want. This is going to change their lives and make it better, right? So product development, you can identify a problem or an opportunity, get out there, and using a whole host of different either managed software. We have, cloud now is really prevalent. You can use managed services. I have a game development background, so if you had an amazing game idea, you can license an engine and just start going and get out there and make this creative thing that makes someone happy or solves some problem in their life. Platform development is completely different. What I can say is this: successful platform development, right? And I want to focus on successful. And what I mean by successful platform development is a platform that is scalable so that it's able to support the number of applications or the products that you need it to. It's compliant. GDPR, PCI, PII. We have so many different regulatory requirements out there now, and they're amazing. But as a developer, it's super challenging. So in my mind, a solid platform is scalable. It's going to meet the needs of the business in terms of what applications need to run on it, what type of technology it needs to provide for those applications to run on it. It's compliant. It means that as an application or product developer, if I use your platform, I can just focus on the business opportunity that I need to solve for. I don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff, right? Like if the data goes in, I know that it's going to be SOX compliant. It's going to apply to GDPR regulations. You shouldn't have to think about any of that. And really that platform offers the right capabilities to ensure that product teams can just focus on building what they want to build. So I've seen some successful platform strategies and I've seen some terribly unsuccessful platform strategies. And here's the differentiating factor between it, from my perspective, at a very high level, about what makes something successful versus not. We all know that product and sort of business needs to drive roadmaps, right? Product has to lead. Well, with platform development, you need not only a product strategy, but you actually need a strategy for your company long term. You need to have a 3+ year, and again, this can kind of scale depending on the size of your company and what kind of platform, if you're using cloud. But something like Booking, really large organizations, and again, this is where my brain is at for the last few years, is pretty large orgs. So in a large organization like Booking, we need a 3-year company strategy that is going to show where are we going in terms of market, the type of product we want to build, and and that's going to then dictate what kind of infrastructure we need to provide to the company. So we need that 3-year horizon, because off of that horizon, we then build an 18-month technology strategy. And that is, over the next 18 months, this is the future state we want to get to. And it's going to potentially take us 12 to 18 months to get there. And then with that 18+, with that 12 to 18 month strategy, then from a platform development perspective, then we actually start looking at, right, what products do we need to build? What capabilities do we need to build? What services do we need to offer our product teams to make sure that we have this scalable, resilient, compliant foundation for our product teams to then go build on in the future. So this for me is like, yeah, we need, it's super long term, but I think that it's something that's super powerful, because the implications of this, right? The implications of this are, if you want to roll out a net new platform, you've got a 6 to 12 month lead time, right? It also means if you want to make major changes to an existing platform, you need to have some lead time. Or, right, the other part is, when you have that 18-month strategy, we are, from an infrastructure perspective at Booking, we have an 18-month technology strategy. We then have been building 12 to 18-month roadmaps. And then from there, we're breaking it down into quarterly detailed schedules. And again, I think this is it's super important to know and to understand that platform developers and platform development really is looking long-term out. It's not this like, oh, we're going to just drop in and do this thing really quickly. It does take a lot of planning. So I wanted to share this. So for example, this is how we addressed planning for core infrastructure this year. So before I go into the details, I'll let you guys take a minute to sort of read through this in just a second. But I want to mention a couple things. Let's talk about Booking for a minute. And actually, before I go on, how's everyone doing? Like, I know that I get excited about this stuff, and I can speak really quickly. So is everyone following? I can't look at either people nodding off or nodding in agreement. It's really weird to not have any feedback. So does this make sense so far? Let me ask that. Okay, awesome. I see a couple confirmations. Again, if I start speaking too quickly because I get super nerdy and excited about this stuff, let me know. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, so let me give you a quick history of Booking, and then we're going to talk about this planning process. So Booking was acquired by Priceline in 2006. Booking grew year over year faster than Google. So from like 2008, 2006, 2007, 2008 through basically the last few years, Booking has had just such explosive growth. And I mean triple digit growth in revenue and bookings and our team size, right? So if you think about that crazy explosive growth, what that meant for us in core infrastructure was every summer when we would hit a peak season, it was just like, it was the Wild West. It was super crazy. We would just literally throw humans and money at any problem. So we need more server space, just go buy up data centers. We need more people to deal with this stuff, just hire. I joined in September of 2017. We had just finished our highest peak to that point with the European summer. And it was like, all right, so what's our roadmap for the next 18 months? Because I'm coming in new, going like, wait, we got to have a roadmap. And people are like, that's adorable, Hardwick. Like, we are just literally trying to get through the next peak season. So the way that Booking grew was very bottoms up. It was very organic. It was very like, okay, we're just, we were a product driven company that just grew explosively. We would throw people at it. We had as many senior devs as graduates at one point, so that we could talk for hours about the scary implications of having new developers getting in their hands with seasoned people. And the code base got really unwieldy. Teams had autonomy and authority to do whatever they needed to do to solve problems just to get through that next peak. So that's literally how Booking had operated year over year. And it worked because we had triple digit growth, right? I encourage everyone to listen to John Bellinger's talk, I think on Thursday. And I think he has a few more details about some of the numbers, but like, it's mind blowing how explosive the growth was. So the reason that I mention that is because it led that crazy growth and that mentality of like, we can't think long term. We just need to get through the next peak season. So don't engineer something to last for 3 years. That's a luxury we don't have. We need to just change our current systems to get through the next peak season. So that's kind of how it was when I started. Um, Moving into the last couple of years, the market's changed, right? COVID has obviously, this is my office. The Dutch call this a room. As an American, I call this an overglorified closet. Things have changed. We're working from home. People are, the travel industry has been hit, explosive, just unbelievably hit. So that obviously put a kink in our revenue, put a kink in people traveling. Um, and it was really an interesting, COVID has been an interesting time because it's kind of put an emphasis on the way that we were operating before wasn't working. It was working, but it wasn't scalable, and we needed to get more efficient with how we were operating as a business. And I think the reason that I mention this is because, when I started at Booking, I was actually the first technical program manager in the core, not only in core infrastructure, but an entire tech org of over 2,000 people. So there, it was, again, when I say it was bottoms up, it was extremely bottoms up. People kind of identified something and they went to start building. So, so the reason that I mention all of that is because over the last my 3 years at Booking, it's been a crazy journey going from teams being able to do whatever they want to do, and just start building, to a much more thoughtful approach around, no, we have an 18-month technology strategy. We need to build a 12 to 18-month infrastructure roadmap to make sure that we are providing the right capabilities to our product partners to make sure that they can meet the business needs moving forward. So what I want to talk about here, sorry, that's probably a bit more context than you guys wanted, but it's super exciting because it's been such an amazing journey at Booking. But the reason that I mention that is because we've basically implemented this planning process in core infrastructure over the last 12 months. So a year ago, it's been basically 18 months to try to go from no plans to actually having 18-month roadmaps with quarterly release schedules. So what I want to talk about here is, this is the journey that we've gone through since August. So a couple things that I want to highlight, and I'll share the slides. They're mostly just commentary, but what I want to talk about here is this, right? This was what core infrastructure went through for our planning process for 2021. What's missing is in July, we published a refresh of our 18-month technology strategy. So in July, it was like, here's an updated 18-month technology strategy, revised because of COVID, because we're having to change our budgets and staffing plans and whatnot. So what we did was, with that 18-month technology strategy, and that strategy was across our CIO org. It was core infrastructure, it was security, it was our big data platform. It was really all of the main platform providers. And I think that was super critical because we all have to work together. And aligning on what those strategic goals were was a total game changer. And it really helped drive the rest of this. So alignment, alignment, alignment. Must have high visible efficiency savings by implementing a 12 to 18-month strategy. Let me get to that in just a second. I think I understand what that means. Let me get to this. So we actually had the technology strategy was an 18-month tech strategy about how all of our main platform teams in the company were going to work together to not only deliver in 2021, but also beyond, because we as a company, as a business, we are changing our product offering a bit, going from hotels to experiences, broadening what that looks like. So this technology strategy is really how we're going to support the business moving forward in that 3-year company strategy. Remember what we talked about before? It's not just in the short term, but that tech strategy is really about what the long-term vision of the company looks like. So once we had that, we kind of came through, and in early August, we identified what the key strategic priorities and kind of themes were for core infrastructure. We came up with 5. These are the 5 key themes, right? The things we really want to invest in and we have to get right. And then in September, we did a pass through August of validating what those assumptions were. And then really working across the CTO org to make sure that those were the right things for the business. We spent a month engaging our customers, talking about, hey, this is what we want to do. This is what we're going to need from you guys, right? This is what our dependencies on you are. These are areas that we're going to have to collaborate, because I don't know how you guys feel about this, but platform developers it takes a tremendous amount of work to be able to say, we've built this thing, we're done. Well, actually, we're not done. Now we have to migrate it. Now we have to integrate it. And that's been a huge challenge across Booking. So I could talk about this for a long time, but I think I want to stop here and basically just say the two things that I want to kind of have you guys understand, or hopefully the point that I want to make with this is planning for a 12 to 18 month roadmap, setting that foundation, and we will do refreshes, but like this is really charting the course for the next 12 to 18 months. We're literally spending 6 months doing this. So it's a crazy investment in time, and it's a crazy investment in planning. And this has been my full-time job for the last 6 months. So it's a super heavy lift. Okay, so if we go back, if we talk about 6 months of time and just doing our plan, what does that mean for when we actually look at how we operationalize that stuff? So a couple things, again, that I want to point out in terms of the difference between, I think, platform development and product development. Release cycles. Oh, good God. Like when I've worked on game teams and different product focused teams, release cycles potentially were daily, weekly, sometimes monthly, but like product teams tend to run really fast, right? Really rapid releases. They tend to be very, very agile. The successful ones that I've worked with always have a vision and kind of have a bit like targets and goals, but they're super agile and super responsive. Yeah, platform teams, generally, we're pushing for quarterly releases. So it's a really big distinction because I think the way that people think about time, time is relative. When we think about a 2-week sprint on a product team, it could be like, oh, we can get 2 releases out in 2 weeks. Whereas a platform team is like, yeah, we finished 1 user story in 2 weeks. For this epic that's going to last, 2 months, for a quarterly deliverable that's going to have 2 major features, right? So that time difference is super important. Platform teams are a mix of agile and waterfall. Because our roadmaps and schedules tend to be so much farther out, we have to invest in upfront timing, right? Or sorry, upfront planning for those things to be successful. So the takeaway for this is, as designers, you really have to have early conversations. You have to get involved super early if you want to be able to impact the long-term development cycles for platform. This is one of my favorite sayings because, I'm program manager. What gets scheduled gets done, right? That is so exceptionally true in the platform world. It has to be on a roadmap. It has to be something that we understand the business value for. It has to be something that's very well scoped and defined, and it has to fall in somewhere. So even something I think that might feel like a pretty small iteration, because platform developers generally tend to look so big picture, because a lot of those tasks and things that they're working on are super deep and super complex and have so many things around the side that they have to plug into or be aware of, making small changes is not always easy. So making sure that you have awareness of what people are working on, making sure that platform developers are aware of what your needs and wants are, and we'll talk about that in a minute, super important, right? Okay, so switching gears for a quick minute. How do you work with software developers? So how do you actually get engaged and kind of get that influence in their roadmaps? I think people forget that software engineers are actually super creative as well. It's just in a slightly different way, right? As a UX designer, I worked on a video game back in like 2005 where the executive producer came and literally sat with my UI designer and was like, I want that button moved 2 pixels over. And I'm like, oh my God, what's our licensing? Like I was freaking out because I'm just like, where is all of this business stuff that I need you to do as our EP? Everyone wants to be a designer, right? Everyone wants to get part of that. And I'm sure it probably drives all of you guys crazy. Same thing for developers, right? I think collaboration is actually the key to success to working with any software engineer, whether it be a platform engineer or a front-end engineer, right? I think utilizing the same skills and collaboration methodologies that you guys as designers use is critical to being successful with developers. Be descriptive, don't be prescriptive. I can't tell you how many times I've had someone come and say, oh, well, I asked him to build this one specific thing. And then what I got what I wanted, but it's not what I needed, right? So don't tell a developer how to do her job in terms of how to actually code up and build something, but instead be super descriptive, outcome driven. Always, always, always start with the outcome. This is what you want to do. This is what you want to achieve. Think holistically in big picture and let that engineer help go along that journey with you, right? They will be way more perceptive, way more collaborative, and way more appreciative. And you're going to, at the end of the day, get a much better result. So think holistically. Holistically is one of my 3 big kind of guiding principles, right? We'll talk about the other 2 in a second. Workflows, images. You guys know this, right? Images literally are worth 1,000 words. It's the same with developers, but I cannot tell you how state workflows are super important. You guys probably already know that, but it bears mentioning that anything that you can put down on either a workflow or a visual or outcomes that you want to drive with what you're asking for, that's super critical. And here's where I think, I want to talk about some detail. Whiteboarding. A 30-minute whiteboarding session with a developer, whether they be, a front-end developer, but especially a platform developer, is going to save you tears months down the line. Absolutely tears. What about when the developer doesn't want to be collaborative? That's a really good question. I'll get to that in just a second. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. Some developers might want to talk. Some might want to have a doc to start. And I think you just kind of have to figure out how your developers want to work. So one of the things that I do to help translate and my nerd herder translation duties is doing whiteboarding sessions. I facilitate a lot of whiteboarding sessions. And here are some of the questions that I ask. Let me find my cheat sheet. Okay, again, start with the big picture, right? So how is this going to be used? Who is going to be using this? First and foremost, don't assume that people get who they're building this tooling for. Who is going to be the user of this? Is this an existing tool or is this a net new tool? If this is something that's existing or that you want to add on to an existing platform or you have something in comparison, take the time to actually sit down with your developer and have them watch you use it. I cannot tell you how often platform developers get surprised about how their tools actually get used because they don't use them in production. They don't use them every day. So taking that time to go through and actually show them your use cases, they will, and just let them absorb that. That is probably one of the most critical and well uses of your time that you can have. What environments do you need this in? Oftentimes people forget, is this just in production? What is a dev environment? What are the requirements for this in your dev environment? Do you need a testing framework around this? Again, if you kind of just go straight into, I need this one thing built, you can sometimes forget all of those really super critical and important things around, the environment and what are the additional add-on things that you need for this to be successful. What type of data is going to be going through this system? Because a lot of times there's security, compliance, we kind of talked about some of that stuff. So make that known as part of your requirements. Again, draw a picture if you can. It really, really does help. And what I would say, I think people assume some of this stuff, but if you take nothing else, get militant about having your definition of done and your acceptance criteria up front. Because when you go to ask for a feature or a tool, if you can't articulate that, don't waste your engineer's time. Because if you're not clear about it, they're not going to be clear about it. And again, that initial kickoff requirements gathering part is so critical. And you will save a lot of time down the path if you have to make sure that that's there up front. And then there's some negotiation, right? That's where these guys can get really creative and think about ways to solve your problems. The last thing that I want to say is, so if a developer doesn't want to be collaborative, hopefully someone either on their team lead, if they have product managers, and someone in that chain of command should be receptive. If they're not, there's a couple things you can do. One is write it up in a doc, send it ahead of time. I think this is just a good practice in general. Write everything up in a doc, send it to your developer partner ahead of time, let them read through it and comment on it. And then when you actually get together, it's not the first time they're seeing it. Talk through it. The other piece of advice that I would have is, please do not expect them to give you an answer on the spot, right? What I can say is, most backend platform developers, they like to think very deeply about certain things. So if you pressure them, to give you an answer right then, that's probably, they might push back. I know a lot of developers that will push back. So, and that makes them not either seem collaborative or want to collaborate because they might feel like they're being pressured. So give them time and space. So just like you have clear definitions, say, right, we've gone through this. What is, when do we check in next? What is our next step? As a program manager, that's always all right, cool. What's our next step? Who's doing what? Who's accountable for what? Who's responsible for what? But not everyone does that. And I think and that can lead to a lot of problems. So just being super direct upfront, this is the ask. Let's when do we regroup, or can you comment on that? Okay. This is a quote that my boss actually said in a meeting yesterday, and I decided to put it on here because it's so important. And I think we forget, right? Engineering is better done when it's better when done with the big picture in mind. And I think sometimes because of either stress or schedules, we kind of I do this as well. Like, okay, what's the thing that we need to do next? Like taking time to take a step back, have those conversations is super important. And I guarantee you this takes time, but it really, really, really does lead to better product. Okay, my last kind of observation and point is coding is actually really easy. Working with humans is not. I think, if you look at some of these questions and a couple of the questions, it's, oh my God, it's the human factor, right? It's always about the human factor that makes it challenging. So, I've made a career out of program managing and working with developers and kind of being that mediator between the business and developers. I can be a little bit arrogant. I feel like I am successful because I take a very humanistic approach to it. I don't ever assume that anything is understood unless we've kind of talked through it. I look holistically at the big picture on things. I always, always, always provide context. I've been accused of providing too much context, but that's generally always a positive thing in the end. So by looking holistically, right, by thinking big picture, what is it that you need? What outcomes are you trying to drive for? Figuring out how to just be really open and transparent about what your goals are with your engineering partners, be they front end or back end platform, right? That'll set a foundation that you can start sort of negotiating and talking through. What it does even more so, though, is it builds trust and it builds relationships. When you take that time, it will slow you down in the beginning, but it will absolutely pay off over 6, 12, 18 months in the long term. So the reason that I say this is, again, it's the human factor. It's not tech. I swear to God, in almost every program that I've ever worked on in 20 years, the tech has been a factor, but the tech is a factor. So for example, the tech has been a factor because we didn't have enough conversation up front about what the requirements and needs were. So the wrong technology was chosen. Went down that path, became apparent it wasn't going to work, scrapped it, had to bring in a new set of technology, slowed everything down. Conversely, right tech, everyone assumes that everything is okay and people just kind of go for it when we don't really align up front on what the requirements are. So it might be the right tech, but it might be utilized wrong. There might not be the right guardrails in place to be successful based on what the outcomes you're trying to drive for. Doesn't matter, like processes and frameworks are great. I lean on a lot of different ones depending on the situation, but at the end of the day, it's a human to human. Hi, how can I help you? What do you need? What are you trying to do? Starting conversations with that has always been, for me, a game changer. This is part of it, right? I'm assuming that everyone has seen this slide. It's kind of the widely adopted change management curve. Oh my God, change management is hard. Change is hard. Again, this is a whole talk on and of itself, how to address this. That timeline for how you deal with shock, denial, acceptance, decision, engagement. That is like we talked about earlier, time is relative. And what that's going to look like for a product team, it might be a shorter span. Platform teams, backend teams, that's definitely it's a lot longer. And again, it really, 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 really is going to be make or break based on relationships. So, at the end of the day, this is probably stating the obvious, but I think engaging uh, with your counterparts, understanding what their planning cycle is, understanding when they're making decisions, understanding that, you know what, we're going to have this business need. We don't have it detailed yet, but can we at least get on your roadmap? I want to put a placeholder on your roadmap so that we can maybe do a design session in 2 to 3 months or in Q2 next year when we have a bit more data, and then just make sure that that's plugged in. Having those conversations is going to help get your platform teams onboarded into what you want to do. And as a program manager, I can tell you this: roadmaps are just that. They're roadmaps. They're guiding. They're guiding kind of documents that help you figure out where you want to go. They're not schedules. Roadmaps are not schedules. Roadmaps are intent that you then build schedules on. From a platform development perspective, you do need those roadmaps, but I'm going to actually go back on something that I said earlier, which is, you need to be very, you need to have those big pictures in mind. You need to have what the big deliverables are on a quarterly basis in mind. How you deliver those, there's a lot of freedom there. And I think that people sometimes forget, like, that's actually where a lot of the creativity of developers comes in, is figuring out, like, what are those actual, like, how do we actually deliver on this? And it's important because how those developers actually deliver on those big quarterly deliverables or on those capabilities has a huge impact on how you as designers engage with those tools. So understanding that big process, understanding when to start getting involved, understanding when to ask questions about certain things is really a game changer. And it can have a positive or very negative impact on your day-to-day lives and how you use those tools. And again, change management is really hard. So when you're changing tools, when you're asking for a new product, this is not easy. But again, it all comes down to human relationships and communication. I keep wanting to hit my keyboard, but that's not doing it. So at the end of the day, look, planning is difficult. There's no silver bullet. Process and frameworks are great, but at the end of the day, it's really dependent on human relationships. And I will say that time and time again, and it's why I have a job. So, assume positive intent. Um, so assuming positive intent in my means think holistically, provide context, and just have ruthless transparency on both sides. Let me finish one more thing, and then I'm going to actually jump to some of these questions. Oops, wrong one. So a few last thoughts, and then I'm going to stop talking because I actually went a couple minutes longer than I wanted to. Things that I think, everyone kind of knows, but sometimes people forget, right? Version 1 of a platform release, even though there's a tremendous amount of time put up front to make sure that platforms are reliable, they're still going to be a bit rough. So only be an early adopter or a first mover on a platform if you're willing to invest the time to grind through some of the issues and be a good partner for your platform developers. If you have a business critical service that you really need, please don't, like, it shocks me how many people are like, we have this service and it's super critical to the success of our ROI and like our income, and we're going to put it on this new platform as soon as it comes out. And I'm just like, oh God, please don't do that, because that's going to end in tears. Just let one or two people go on to it first. Let them make sure that the documentation is where it needs to be. Let them make sure that all of the monitoring and alerting is set up the way that it needs to. Then put your business critical service on it. Please don't do that. There are things at booking sometimes where it's like, oh, you're going to have the R1 beta release in January, and we're going to put this critical service on it in February. And I'm like, no, you're not. Really good platforms worry about compliance and regulatory issues and constraints so that you as developers and as product developers don't have to. So that's so important, but that takes so much time. So if you are asking for something, remember to be patient. Ask what all of the, not just the capabilities that they're delivering, but what are all of the things wrapped around it that need to be there to be a successful, resilient, reliant, compliant platform. And knowing what that means will also help you gauge, like, realistically what the timeframes could and should be before you get this new thing. Even platforms have life cycles. They tend to sometimes be longer than applications, but systems all have life cycles. So they're going to go through design, development, deployment, operationalization, and then deprecation. that's an amazing, and I think people forget, like, because these things have life cycles, it's an amazing opportunity to be able to see, do we need to start deprecating this system in lieu of something else because of a business change or a technology opportunity? So looking at what platforms you have in play, looking at what their life cycles are there opportunities to collaborate with your platform developers and get on to something, make something build something better, faster, stronger in the future? And the last thing that I'm going to leave you guys with this is this. Planning and collaboration with software engineers is a journey. When I started at Booking, it was, as a program manager, I was the first one. People didn't know how to work with me. People resented the hell out of me asking them for plans. Even product managers across the business were like, "Who are you, and why do I have to tell you what I'm doing? And I got this. Bye." Um, and then over an 8-month period of relentless communication, proving what the value was, building collateral with these guys to help, like, hey, here's a couple docs that you can share with people that give you the high level. Here's a user diagram that you can actually go sit with your partners in security to make sure that everything is connecting, right? That resentment actually started turning into appreciation. And I'm now working on that adoration phase. I'm not there yet, but this life cycle is when you get and work with teams around planning, and when you understand and communicate with them about outcomes and focus on what you guys can build together, it's absolutely amazing, the collaboration. And I think one of the questions earlier was, what happens if developers don't want to collaborate? Let them know what you're doing and why. People forget that the why is just as important to engineers as it is to product designers. If you get them on board, it takes time, but they will be part of that journey. They will really invest more to make sure that you get what you want, because they understand the value that it's going to drive. So with that, I'm going to stop talking. I went about 10 minutes over. I apologize. I wanted to stop a little bit sooner, but thank you guys. I see a couple questions. We can kind of start taking some of these questions. If you have more questions, pop them in there.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation.
Yes. Thank you.
It was very detailed. You spoke in a very nice manner, and it was, I think, very insightful. So thank you. Yeah, we do have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So first one is anonymous. Who specifically makes the planning at the booking.com, if I may ask? Are designers and developers also included?
So that's a good question. It's a mix, right? So we have, and I think this is the same for almost any big organization. We're going to have 2 layers of planning. Strategic, right? The business. What are the business goals driven by our board to a certain extent? So at Booking, we actually have long-term business objectives where we want to see ourselves in the market, right? Like where do we want to be in the market? So that drives the first part of it. We have a strategy team that then takes those company objectives and starts mapping those out into objectives for our product, for what we want to do from a product perspective. And what we did this year is the strategy team led, and then, then with that strategy direction, we looked at our, COVID obviously changed it. So we kind of did a reboot of everything. So we have that strategy. We revised our technology strategy. And then basically from that corporate strategy level, all of the different business units and verticals across Booking kind of snapped to that. And that's for like the top line, like 30 to 40% of the work that we need to do as a company to get us there, if that makes sense. And then in parallel, core infrastructure, we did our own planning cycle in parallel because we have a number of programs that we care about that don't go all the way up to that corporate portfolio. So really, truly, it was 2 layers. So corporate strategy, our director group from a product, like where do we need to go? And then we had our managers all the way down to our individual contributor product managers that just actually shepherded all of our proposals for 21 for core infrastructure. We literally just last week finished doing these detailed product proposals for what we wanted to do, not only for that big strategy, the corporate portfolio, but for things that are important for us to deliver to our partners in addition to. Does that make sense?
It does. I think it was quite elaborative, so thank you.
Sorry.
It was
Lots
great.
Of context.
And then a question from Peter Boersma. What activities and deliverables help you and your team most in keeping the bigger picture in mind?
What deliverables and activities help us keep the big picture in mind? Start with outcomes. Always, always, always start with an outcome. What is the outcome you want to drive? And get clear about that from the beginning, right? So for example, I'm trying to think of something that's safe to talk about. Booking is, I think it's, booking is a Perl monolith, and we are going through a transformation right now to go into a service-oriented architecture, and we're trying to drive more of a DevOps model and like we've got digital migrations, cloud migrations, SOA like we've got all of these things, and it's so easy to be like, oh my god, like it'll take us 5 years to get through everything that we want to. So really focusing on outcomes and logical steps, right, is being really clear about what it is that you want to do really helps you get clear about like, right, I could do that, but we actually want to do this because it's going to help us get closer to that specific outcome to start. So, I mean, this is a whole other conversation. I did a talk with our program managers about, leading a 3-hour workshop on how to do some of that mapping stuff. So it's a really complicated answer, but focus on the outcome. Really, again, when I say get clear about your acceptance criteria and definition of done, that definition of done, is this a V1? Is this production ready? Is that like what's the first step? And just try to break it up into those small steps as possible. And we just revisit that all the time though. We revisit every 2 weeks what our teams are working on. We do monthly business reviews. We do quarterly objective reviews. Like it's a constant cycle of evaluation.
Nice. Thank you. Then we have a question by Simon. He says, Rachel, really interesting presentation with great perspectives and insight. So my question, how do you ensure you have the right perspective, specifically that you are not down with the details when you should be stepping back and taking a bigger picture perspective and vice versa? How do you identify your need to switch, and how do you train people who have the skill to switch?
Haha, that is a very good question. There's a few of them. So, okay, the oh my gosh, are we really? What time is it? Oh,
we have 2 more minutes.
Couple minutes. Okay, so really quickly, I think yes, you can get a copy of these slides. I will share them. Where are these outcomes documented? So they're kind of the same. So outcomes always start documented, by the way, in a document, because you can. What we do is we write a document. And so this actually answers Simon's question as well. We start with writing a document, which is, what is the product? Who is this for? What is the outcome you're trying to drive with this product? What are the quarterly capabilities? We don't even talk about how we implement it. What are the capabilities from a platform perspective you are going to provide on a quarter by quarter basis, right? Remember how we push for quarterly releases, which is a bundling of capabilities. So we start with a document. And it's between 3 and 5 pages per product that outlines, right? Like, who is this for? What are the capabilities we're going to deliver? What are your success metrics and KPIs? And what is your migration and adoption plan? We put that in a document first. And then I think, Simon, to answer your question, we actually get all of our leads across our core infrastructure org. So all of our principal developers, all of our managers of software development, we open it to all of our product developers. And what we do is we get in a big room. Well, not anymore. We do it virtually. We just spent, we'll spend 4 hours to go through a track of 80 people. And the first 20 minutes is everyone read this first section of the doc, put comments in there. Comment, and then we come back and we don't read through the doc. We just manage by exception. We just go through all of those comments. And what that does is it really broadens the perspective. It makes sure that we have data scientists asking really good questions about our data platform. It makes sure that we have engineers and product managers and customers from across the org. We just open that up. Like when I say ruthless transparency, I mean it, right? So we get that and we crowdsource. And then that goes into Jira, where we take those deliverables, each of those capabilities turns into an epic user story in Jira that gets broken down and scheduled and delivered. And we do monthly reviews. The last part about how do you train people to do this, it's experience, and a hell of a lot of patience.
Thank you so much. So yeah, it's exactly 11, so perfect timing. Thank you everyone who joined us today. Our next talk will be at 2 with Joe Leach, making strategic decisions with jobs to be done. And Rachel, a great thank you once more. And
Thank you for having
everyone
me,
have
guys.
a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.